the suspension should be stronger than what an alloy wheel is. And therefore, in most cases, the wheel might be shattered, but the suspension wouldn't have snapped off like a twig in the breeze. And I'd be perfectly happy to use a forged alloy carabinier, or how do you say it, crab as we call it, because I know that it's sort of strong enough to do the job. There's no way I could trust my life to a piece of extruded aluminium. There's just no way.
Before getting into our normally scheduled disclaimer read for the podcast, I'd just like to say that during the course of editing this particular episode, the plan had been to have a somewhat lighthearted parody song rendition included with the show. I may still put that at the end, but here at the front, just like to point out a sad news item. There was a wreck of a Tesla in the state of Florida, and there are pictures on Twitter of it, and it looks pretty terrible. The car is up in flames, and it looks like the right rear wheel, so that's the passenger side wheel, did possibly have a suspension issue in the wreck. I have no idea if that caused the wreck or anything. The driver did pass away, unfortunately, and the fact that this popped up during the course of me editing this episode was surreal, as I said on Twitter. So I just thought it would be better maybe to include that up front, just to let you know that, Tesla Q is a lot about fun and games, but this is a real life and death situation, as evidenced by this particular wreck. I obviously I don't know the cause of the wreck or anything, but it's just something to keep in mind as you listen to this interview with Keef Wheels. So with that, we'll get to our normal disclaimer read. Thanks.
The Tesla Q podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended for and should not be used as financial, investment, or trading advice. Research associated with fiscal decisions should be conducted elsewhere. The host of the show possesses no license or credentials to warrant accepting advice based on what is heard on the Tesla Q podcast. Additionally, even though the host and guests may hold positions in companies discussed on the show, they don't have insights into the next time step of the simulation. Therefore, do not make any financial decisions based on the contents of this podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode number 19 of the Tesla Q podcast. Today's episode is an interview with Keef Wheels from all the way down under. Quick reminder, if you'd like to make a contribution to the podcast, you can go to the Square Cash app and search for Tesla Q podcast. That's TSLAQ podcast. Or go to any browser and go to cash.me/Tesla Q podcast. Apologies, that only accepts debit cards. In the near future, I will be looking into getting a Patreon account to be a bit more like a real podcast. Did get a $4.20 contribution just a couple days ago on the Square Cash app, so thanks for that. And also, don't forget, if you want some Shorty merchandise, go to evacuationboy.com. There are some nice coffee mugs and t-shirts, other shirts, and posters that are available. They do ship even to Europe, I believe I've seen. So go there, find some merch you like. And with that, we'll get to the interview with Keef Wheels. Going to be including two links in the show notes for this show. One is to the Tesla Bears Club site that Keef mentions during the interview, and the other is to Keef's book on Amazon about The Great Suncube Swindle is the name of the book, and it's on Amazon. Hello, I'm here today with Keef Wheels for an interview for episode number 19 of the Tesla Q podcast. Welcome, Keef.
And welcome to you, and thank you for having me.
No problem. We're going to talk a little today about the safety of Tesla vehicles and some of Keef's experience in that regard and some of his experience prior to that. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Keef.
Right. Okay. So my background is that I was born in England, and when I left school, I went to did an apprenticeship, and my family has got a sort of a history of engineers, back to my grandfather, who was got a bit famous as an engineer. But anyway, and none of my parents' generation went to university. They didn't have a PhD or anything, but they were perfectly entitled to call themselves engineers. And when I left school, I was very lucky to get a 4-year apprenticeship with it was the Ministry of Aviation at that time, but it doesn't really matter. And I was taught electrical and electronic engineering, and I was taught the use of hand tools and machine tools, and from the absolute basics. And then concurrent with that was college education. So that took 4 years. And there's lots of sort of pretty successful graduates come out of that scheme. So anyway, this is my excuse for when people tell me that I can't call myself an engineer because I don't have a doctorate. I go, well, I've got a lot more right to call myself an engineer than some people I can think of.
Yeah, in most jurisdictions in the United States, I believe, to legally call yourself an engineer, you're supposed to be a licensed professional engineer, from my understanding.
Yeah, I don't. You can argue about that, but whatever. Yeah, we all know what engineer is.
Well,
a train driver is an engineer, if you want to put it that way. So.
Yeah. All right. I understand that you have...
Let me just backtrack a second.
Go ahead.
Backtrack a second there. As part of that training that I did, we did materials testing. In the same way that you have non-destructive testing, you also have destructive testing, where you put a sample into a hydraulic press and you measure the tensile strength and the yield point and the elasticity and all of those things. So I've done that. I know about materials. I'm not a metallurgist, but I know the difference between good quality metals and less good quality metals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and area is a key factor if you're looking at stresses, obviously. So cross-sectional areas. I'm sure we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
I understand that you have some prior experience with uncovering a fraud. Do you want to talk about that any? Or
yeah, I'll try not to bore you because it's been at the front of my mind for about 10 years or so, and I can't get a bit boring on it. But anyway, in short, I was building a house. Among the other things I've done, I've built several of my own houses and I've renovated houses. So anyway, getting to the sort of final stage, I decided that I wanted to go solar. So it just so happened that I saw a story about this sun cube, and it was supposed to be the best thing ever, and it would give you much more power for much lower cost and all the rest of it. And anyway, in short, it was just a scam because he never delivered any of these sun cubes. He never put them up for testing. And the whole purpose of his enterprise was to sell franchises and to ensnare a public listed company in America called MCOR. And as a result of my whistleblowing on that one, there was a pretty big scandal over it, and MCOR got a bit of a slap over the wrist from the SEC, but that was all. But the investors in that company lost over $1 billion. Over $1 billion was wiped off the share price. The share price went from about $16 down to about $4. So it was a pretty big deal. Anyway, that's enough of that.
All right.
I then became really cynical about sort of what I call green widget schemes or green scams, because as Greg Watson proved, and Greg Watson was the man with the sunball thing, all you have to do, and perfectly legally to do, is to claim that you've invented some new planet-saving green thing. And firstly, nobody will ever dare question what you're saying because it's such a popular thing, and we all would like to have clean energy. There's no doubt about it. I'd love to have clean energy. In fact, I do. I'm completely off grid. I put in my own solar system. So I'm a believer in not shitting in your own nest and using less electricity. I'm a believer in that. Anyway. I've completely lost my train of thought if I did have one now. So I started sort of being very cynical about all of these new invention things. And I'd get onto a chat room and I'd sort of talk about some new thing that I'd seen I didn't think was all that good. And I'd very often get thrown off the chat rooms for being negative and for daring to say anything about people that were sort of going to do something great for the planet. And so I stumbled across Tesla. And I started sort of questioning their green credentials, because I thought that like a 3-ton sports car with insane acceleration and all the rest of it is not really what we need right now. Like a small electric town car that could take you from your home to your place of work, etc., and not sort of put any fumes into the city. Terrific idea. I'm all in favour of that. Terrific idea. But I just don't see how the Tesla sort of fits into the scheme of that. So, moving right along, I started sort of looking for more and more information about Teslas, and I came across a really disturbing pattern of Tesla crash And the images that I'd sort of find on doing a Google image search were quite disturbing, because I found that in so many cases where there'd been a crash, that there was one of the wheels come off, most commonly one of the back wheels, but sometimes the front wheels. And then I sort of Googled more and more and found all of these images of salvage cars, which were in the salvage yards, which again, half of them had the back wheel missing and the suspension snapped off. And I thought, well, there's something radically wrong here, because the suspension should be stronger than what an alloy wheel is. And therefore, in most cases, the wheel might be shattered, but the suspension wouldn't have snapped off like a twig in the breeze.
So you started following this more with the release of the Model S rather than the Roadster, because the Roadster was a much smaller vehicle.
Well, I started off, my interest started off with the Roadster, and probably because I saw the Top Gear report on it. And I thought at the time, well, all they've done is taken a really quite nice sports car, which is the Lotus Elise, which is, I'd love to have one of those, when I was young enough to enjoy it. But a lovely car. But they sort of pulled all the guts out of it and put a gigantic battery into it. And as we tore from sort of Top Gear, sure, it would go like a rocket, but it wasn't so good on corners, and it didn't go very far. So Elon's solution to that was, of course, to sue Top Gear, and that went nowhere. So, So back onto the snapping bits. Okay, so I looked at all these photographs of the suspensions and found out there was a common thread to them. There was mostly the rear suspension, the upper toe link snapped. And I looked into the story of how the toe links are manufactured. And instead of being machined from a billet of aluminium, first of all, they use an extrusion process. So they squirt out, and this is quoting Tesla's own proud PR back in sort of 2012, and they squirt out these extrusions like a sausage, and then they chop it just like lumps of Play-Doh. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound too inspiring for a critical suspension component. And then I sort of started thinking a bit more about it and doing a bit more research, and I realised that there's a huge flaw with making the suspension components that way, and that is that the grain runs crossways. In other words, it runs the length of the extrusion. Now, when you slice off a piece of that and use it for a suspension link, where it's alternately in compression and in tension, that is just guaranteed to snap, because it's like having a piece of wood, or a better analogy would be balsa wood, and you can sort of tug on both ends of if you get a sheet of balsa wood, you can tug on either end of it and you'll never break it. It's tremendously strong in the grain direction, with the direction of the grain. However, if you try and sort of pull it sideways, it'll just split immediately and shatter, because it has a grain. And although we don't think of metals as having a grain, in fact they do. The crystalline structure is sort of it's not my it's not my expertise, but there is certainly a crystal structure to aluminium, and it's a vastly different structure to what you've got when you extrude the metal. People with expertise in that area can step in, but I will state that I am certain that is a weak and unsafe way of making these suspension components.
Yeah, my understanding is there's lots of different grain structures. Body-centered cubic is one of them that I remember from a class that I took previously. And heat treatments on metal components can change the grain structure different ways and make different metals harder and stuff like that. So
interestingly enough, in the last year, Tesla have redesigned the suspension, and they're making them from forged alloy. Now, I'm perfectly happy with that. I've done a little bit of abseiling, and I'll be perfectly happy to use a forged alloy carabinier, or how do you say it, crab as we call it, because I know that it's sort of strong enough to do the job. There's no way I could trust my life to a piece of extruded aluminium. There's just no way.
Mm-hmm. So in this research, you've collected a lot of these pictures, right?
Yes.
And put them on a website somewhere?
Yes. My immediate course of action was to report these cases to the SEC. And I filed over 200 complaints about snap suspensions, and they've all been published on NHTSA, on NHTSA. And simultaneously, I posted a copy of the complaint and photographs which supported my evidence that there was a pattern of failure. I posted these on a site called Tesla Bears Club. Now, I didn't own that site. I can't even remember exactly who the guy was that sort of ran it, but it was a site which allowed me to put criticisms of Elon Musk and Tesla on the site without him taking them down. Because I've been banned from sort of Twitter and Facebook and innumerable internet forums because I dare to say something bad about Elon Musk. So anyway, so I put my posts on this Tesla Bears Club site, and I did not have any financial interest. I didn't hold any short shares or put shares or anything. I had no financial interest. I was doing it because I was really concerned that people are dying as a result of this thing. After about 6 months of this, I got attacked by Elon Musk, who said that my complaints were fraudulent, and you'll find that all over the net. And I've rejected those allegations, and I've challenged him, and you'll find a copy of my challenge to Elon Musk on that Tesla Bears site. And I've challenged him to have me charged with fraud. And now, just to sort of make his case a bit easier, I've taken out some put options on Tesla. So I have a financial interest, and if it's true that I'm making fraudulent claims with the intention of bringing down the share price, I can be extradited, but there's no need for that. I'll come voluntarily. Just take me to court. Musk, go right ahead, take me to court. But don't call me a pedo. I won't be impressed with that.
Yeah, ironically enough, just this evening, we're recording on February 22nd in the Eastern time zone of the United States. But just earlier this evening, the response by Vern Unsworth's attorney made available online. So,
yeah,
you already read that?
Yeah, no, I read the whole thing. I read like lightning. So there you go.
If he does decide to call you a pedo, maybe you could jump on board and be part of that suit as well.
Well, I'd love to sue him for calling me fraudulent. I mean, that's defamatory. And the last person that did that was my friend Greg Watson from the SunCube thing. And when I challenged him and sort of told him that his invention was bullshit and he was a con artist, he came out and called me a short seller and a criminal. And I took Greg Watson to court for defamation, and I won my case. And I did that to bring down a scammer. It turned out to be the stupidest thing I've ever done because I never got a cent back, and it cost me over 50 grand in legal fees. So, I won the case. I thought that would have been sufficient. To sort of go, hey, but to this day, people are still defending him. You're going, oh, he needs a bit more time, a bit more money, that's all he needed.
Yeah, with that particular instance, the key physics factors are the area of the collector. And in that case, it looked like they had a tracker so that it would have a little bit better angle of sunlight.
Well,
other than
that's no big deal, and really nobody bothers with trackers. Nobody bothers with trackers anymore. They're more trouble than they're worth, but that's another topic.
Mm-hmm. So the main thing that you've looked at with Tesla is the suspension, and you have...
well, it started off that way, but of course I've been a little bit interested in the blazing batteries and in the slaughter pilot. So I sort of gathered a fair bit of sort of research on those and filed quite a few complaints. You'll find all my complaints on the Tesla Bears Club, and I made heaps of them. I've sort of let's do the batteries first of all. Aside from the fact that Tesla had chosen the most incendiary grade of battery that you can get. And you'll see YouTubes all over the place of people with an electronic cigarette, and it's exploding in the back pocket, and that's what one cell can do. That's what one of these type cells can do. Okay, well, that's bad enough. We can live with that, I suppose, because we've got a management system. So how do they keep that thing cool then, Elon? We'll have radiators right at the front, where they'll get bloody burst easily in a crash. And then we'll fill the whole thing up with fluid. Oh, that's interesting. So what kind of fluid is this then? Well, it's ethylene glycol. Oh, okay. So you sure that's not flammable? Oh, no, not really, not much. Well, it is not as flammable as a neat ethylene glycol, but when you get it hot, and so when you're driving the car, especially if you're driving it hard and you get into a crash, that fluid is going to be really hot. If, to add to the excitement, one of the cells decides this is a good time for it to sort of do its thing and go off like a firecracker, you've then got a geyser of flammable liquid coming out. And you see this happening in crash after crash. There's not just the batteries. In fact, in some cases, the batteries are not actually exploding because they go off like firecrackers with a white flame and a very distinctive sort of pattern of pyrotechnics. In a lot of cases, it's really the ethylene glycol. There's probably thermal runaway in the pack, but the boiling ethylene glycol is coming out, it's found a source of ignition, and away you go. And there was that case where one crashed into a garage and sort of burnt the garage down, and the fire department was there for hours and hours trying to put the damn thing back out again. But you could see that from the very start, it was pools of ethylene glycol on the ground that were fueling the fire. That's enough of that topic.
Yeah, there was just earlier this week, there was a wreck in, I think it was a Model X in Fremont itself. And it was a Tesla worker driving, and there was a fire there that took a while to put out. Some pictures of it all over Twitter.
Yep. And, whenever there's a Tesla crash and the victim sort of walks away not too injured or uninjured, the Twitter is full of sort of, oh, it saved my life, and isn't it wonderful, and oh, it's the safest car in the world, and all the rest of it. When one crashes in flames and kills people, you don't get anything, you don't get anything at all. So let's jump on the slaughter pilot, shall we?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so I've always thought from the beginning that it wasn't a real good idea because in an aircraft, the autopilot that's used at cruising altitude is pretty simple. They've been around for donkey's years, even now they're much improved. But all the thing has to do is to keep you straight and level and go in the right direction. Pretty easy. You do have automatic landing systems because that's where it gets a lot more scary. And if the airport is equipped with the right sort of repeaters on the ground and all the rest of it, and it's foggy, then it's okay to make a sort of an automatic landing. Most of the time, 99% of the time, I'd say, the pilot makes the landing. You don't trust the autopilot to do a good enough job. Now, with the Tesla autopilot, it's a really simplistic system. Never mind the things that could go wrong with the software and the image recognition and all of those things. You've got the fact that the mechanics of it, the power-assisted steering, which is what works the autopilot, is run through a pretty crude little electric motor power systems thing, and it's not duplicated. Now, all of the crucial systems on aircraft are duplicated and even triplicated, and they're rigorously inspected to be sure that they're safe. These things just get factory gated, and there's no way of telling how good or bad things are. And I see videos all the time, and I've seen them for years, of people sort of following Elon's example and driving with their arms crossed over their chests and having absolute faith in his autopilot because Elon's told them that it's sort of 4 times safer than any human driver. I mean, where do we go from there?
Yeah, and just earlier this week, I think he has made some additional claims that by the end of this year, he expects to have full self-driving, and the ability to actually sleep he doesn't think is all that far down the road.
Yeah. I think I did hear something like that from Elon last year and the year before and the year before that, but there you go.
Yeah, I think you might be right. It's kind of like fusion power being perpetually 10 years down the road, or 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is.
Yeah. done a bit of research on some of those scams too, but hey, another story.
Yeah, there's probably been quite a few of those, actually.
Back on that steering rack thing, starting back a couple of years ago, people started complaining that in sort of Canada and in North America, where there's snow and salt on the roads, that several people have just found out one morning that their steering rack just fell to bits. The steering motor fell off. And finally, after about a year of sort of agitation and me posting quite a few complaints to NHTSA, etc., Tesla issued a sort of voluntary recall, and they assured people that it wasn't really dangerous and it was just a matter of popping in when it was suiting, etc. That recall is dragging its heels like you wouldn't believe, and there are still probably 100,000 or more cars on the road that potentially have this steering rack about to fall to bits. And unlike a conventional car, when you can just look under the bonnet, the hood as you call it, and you can have a look that the steering pump's okay and the belt's not frayed or anything other with that. No, on the Tesla, it's buried under the front liner, and even then it's buried down beneath another layer of guts of the car. So you don't know there's a problem until there's a problem.
Now, is that a problem that actually reared its head while people were in motion?
Yes, and
caused wrecks, or
I don't know about the wrecks because people are very sort of slow in coming forward, admitting that they had a wreck where it was could possibly have been Tesla's fault. Maybe sort of just because of random sort of backtracking here. So a couple of years ago, I was talking to a cousin of mine who's sort of well-educated engineer, in fact, and I was talking to him and I showed him the images of Whompy Wheels and everything, and he sort of he did me the courtesy of looking at all my images of Whompy Wheels and things, and he said, well, he said, it's like any other conspiracy theory, I suppose, you can produce a lot of evidence to show that you're right, but at the end of the day, it's just a conspiracy theory. And that's what I seem to be up against with, perfectly reasonable, intelligent people. They wanted to believe in Elon Musk, and they did. They chose to believe, and his mission to accelerate whatever it is through storefronts, whatever. They bought into that, and there's a sort of psychological sort of pressure then to not go, hang on, I've been taken for a ride, I've been all wrong. It's a sort of Stockholm syndrome, So many people that do get sort of fleeced end up, and whether it's sort of that this guy's taken their money or just that he's taken their trust, it's the same game to them because that's what a con artist does. Well, I think a glaring red flag is the fact that NHTSA published that Autopilot 40% safer graph and statement and gave legitimacy to the idea that, Elon's right, it really is safer than a human. And to this day, they haven't retracted that. And then there was a crash in China way early in the piece where this guy trusted the Autopilot because the salesman told him that you could just relax and read a book or whatever, and he went plowed straight into the back of the truck. And the explanation comes out a long time later that, it'll do that because it's designed to ignore stationary objects because it might be, for example, a highway sign just off to the side of the road, and you don't want the car just slamming on the brakes for no reason because that's. So the Tesla sort of errs on the sort of just carry on side of things. But Musk has known, and Tesla has known of this weakness for years. Even before that, there was any publicity for that crash in China. There was Joshua Brown who went under a truck and got his head chopped off. People have gone straight into barriers and all the rest of it. It ignores stationary objects. I mean, why isn't that sort of a screaming headline? Be careful. Tesla Autopilot ignores stationary objects. Please be careful.
And they've publicized that they have this new chip, this new hardware that's coming out. I think it's version 3 of their Autopilot hardware. And all these people believe Elon Musk that it's actually going to be something like I think he claimed something like 1,000 times better than the prior version in terms of the number of frames it calculate or whatever.
It sounds absolutely lovely. Now, can we see some sort of proper trials of this done, please, before we unleash it on the public? Can we sort of see it tested to prove that what you're claiming is correct? Please.
That would be nice, yes. But maybe similar to that NHTSA data, that might hurt Tesla in terms of the proprietary nature of the data, which something that's relating to safety, you got to have a hierarchy of needs, and safety should definitely be higher on the list than helping Tesla maintain the proprietary nature of their data.
Yeah, I think public safety comes number one, we'll get into this conspiracy thing again. So NHTSA allowed Tesla to perpetuate this myth that the Autopilot is 40% safer. And that had a direct effect of causing people to use it in a reckless manner, to use it while doing something else, while on the phone or arms crossed or fiddling with the touchscreen and everything. It encouraged that. Now, to their credit, or to the credit of some junior clerk perhaps, I don't know, all of my complaints, and they're now way over 300, all of my complaints are actually in this database on Tesla. And so are also probably about half as much again, or maybe the same amount again, from genuine owners who've supplied their direct contact details and everything, and they're not just some sort of nutcase from down under who's just putting some frivolous complaints in. These are from actual owners. So hundreds and hundreds of complaints about serious safety issues, and yet there's been no real action from NHTSA. Now, if you sort of scale it up to, say, a mass market car, General Motors or Ford or whatever, you wouldn't be talking about just a few hundred complaints. If you scale that up proportionally, it would mean that Ford or Toyota have had tens of thousands of complaints on safety issues, and they haven't. And before they ever get to that level, they'll take action. So you can blame this on the sort of the algorithm that NHTSA used to determine if a threshold has been sort of crossed. You can blame it on that, but I'm more inclined to blame it on sort of straight up sort of, I'm not sure if corruption is the right word, but entrapment, because they've given Musk a little and he's taken a lot. And if now they go, well, hang on, you've gone too far, the whole thing unravels. And they go, if this ever gets out in the public, all of these safety issues. Back to the blazing batteries, another random thought. So they had some fires in 2013, 2014, and one or two of those involved Whompy Wheels, but they certainly involved fires. And photographs of the scene, again, show this blazing glycol on the ground. And the response to that was, well, we'll fit this titanium shield under the battery, and we've tested it with sort of sharpened steel pikes set in the highway, and we've smashed it into a concrete block and all of this, and it's completely bulletproof. The ride height up a couple of inches, just in case it sort of strikes another bloody tow ball on the road or something. And that was the end of the NHTSA inquiry. And then quietly, they lowered the ride height back down to what it should have been, and they gave a few people these titanium panty shields, which weigh about sort of 8 ounces, and they're held on with sort of 4 little panhead screws, and the whole thing is ridiculous. It couldn't protect the battery from bloody anything, but that was the window dressing at the time to go, oh, we'll fix that problem. And ignoring the fact that since that, probably at least 100 other Teslas have gone up in flames on the highway, in crashes, or just randomly.
The Tesla employee who was in the crash earlier this week was fortunate and was able to get out of the vehicle before the fire got him, I guess.
The apologists claim that a battery fire is a much slower event and they'll have plenty of time to get out of the car and everything. But, I mean, there's been a whole series of fatal accidents which show that that's not the case. And then if a fire truck or even a sort of bystander happens to have a fire extinguisher, you've got a very good chance of putting out a gasoline, as you call it, we call it petrol, a petrol fire. You've got a very good chance of putting it out with a fire extinguisher. And once you've done that, it won't flare up again. That's it. Sure, if the whole car is enveloped in flames like a bloody Ford Pinto, then yeah, it's a bit too late. You need a very big fire extinguisher. But it's a reality that these battery packs, when they take off, they're near impossible to extinguish.
I think I've seen multiple reports that it was 3 to 4 hours just to get the fire out.
I can tell you that those fumes aren't good. You can look up the safety information on lithium batteries and on burning glycol, and you wouldn't want to be breathing any of that stuff. Horrible effects. And probably the smoke would probably kill you quicker than the fire would, almost certainly.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the case with a lot of fires, probably, actually.
Yeah, but Tesla takes it to another level with that battery pack.
Moving back to the wheels, you've got the collection of photos and the complaints that you've made, and it seems like they've changed the design. Do you know of any other ongoing activities with the NHTSA or anything regarding that issue? Or
no, I don't know what they're doing. I've never seen one of the new Ford links snap. Tesla have got a technical service bulletin, TSB, which shows how to swap the old link, or the old Sparrow's leg link, for a new link, but there's no recall and no action seems to be happening to retrofit that to the 100,000 plus Teslas that are on the roads, and they're still snapping to this day.
I know there's someone, I think it might be Elon Bachman on Twitter, who's keeping track of the number of deaths that have occurred in Teslas.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that data set?
Yes. Last time I checked it was over 40, probably heading up towards 50 or 60. And the point was that comparable large luxury cars, like sort of Mercedes, top of my head, and some of the Japanese makes, have a zero fatalities record for the several years that they've been released. Now, Tesla is a sort of, on its sort of plus side, it's a big heavy thing, and it's jam-packed full of airbags, so you've got a better than average chance of escaping a crash. But even then, the fatalities are off the scale compared to comparable cars. And Teslas are going to be mostly bought by sort of the older demographic, say, because the time you've got enough money you can afford a Tesla usually means you're a mature age driver. And with it being an expensive car, and with hopefully not being a young tearaway or anything, the crash rate should be quite low because they'd be conservative drivers. But despite that, the Model 3, by the way, is a different thing altogether because it's pitched at the young guys, people that sort of like to play with the touchscreen and talk on their phone to me. It's pitched directly at them, and that seems to be
like the really fast acceleration also.
Why do you need that? I thought we were supposed to be sort of transitioning the planet to a fossil-free future or something. How does that sort of match in with ludicrous and insane acceleration and whatever they call it on the Model 3? How does that sort of jibe? It doesn't.
That's a good question, yeah.
And, distracted driving is a leading cause of death, and this Model 3 is just a temptation to be distracted. In fact, it's a necessity to be distracted because you might want to put the windscreen wipers on, and that means possibly drilling down through 3 levels of the menu, stabbing with your hand while you're holding onto the steering wheel with the other hand. It's madness.
Mm-hmm. Part of their sales pitch with these vehicles is the fast acceleration that, in a way, encourages people probably to drive them maybe in a manner that's not the most safe.
Well, why else would you buy one? And I can see it.
Save the planet, and to show that you're saving the planet.
Well, there's that too, yeah. And how are the refunds going, by the way? Because I know a lot of people in Australia have put down their $1,000 deposit, which is, I find quite amusing because 90% of our electricity comes from burning coal, and then the coal we've got left over, we export around the world to Japan and China and all the rest of it. So, we're a coal-fired country. And sure, you could put solar panels on your roof, but really? I've got solar panels on my roof. I couldn't plug in a Tesla. scared things might go wrong. As long as I've got my plastic on, riding on the dashboard of my car. Through my trials and tribulations and my travels across the nations, with my plastic on, I will embark. Riding down the thoroughfare with his nose up in the air, a wreck may be high, but he don't mind. Trouble coming, he don't see. He just keeps his eye on me and any other things that lie behind. Plastic, he's on. Plastic, he's on. Riding on the dashboard of my car. Once his rose, snow white, now it isn't quite so bright. It's staying by the smoke from my cigar. That's probably enough of that, or else I'll get into the Whompy direction.
All right. Well, Keef, thanks for joining today. Any final words before we close out this interview?
Yeah, stay safe. Look out for Teslas. And I just hope that, that this charade, idiotic, bloody Elon Musk sort of thing will be over. I feel like the little boy that sort of shouted, "The Emperor's got no clothes on," because I've been doing that for bloody years. And I also feel a bit like the boy that cried wolf, so I don't know where he lies.
I feel like I've been crying wolf for a while on this stock, and some people listen, of course. The Tesla Q people listen, but some of the people on the other side have closed their ears, it seems like. So. Well,
the shocking thing that I find is that the media holds up Musk to be a hero and has never questioned it, the mainstream media. And whenever he's on 60 Minutes or something, you've got these sort of reporters who just just salivating, just go, oh, Elon, oh, you're a god, and all the rest of it. Can't they just see what bullshit this is? It's madness. And it's like the product launches, like the Model 3 launch and the Semi launch and the sewer pipe to nowhere, all of those things. He has his hand-picked cheerleaders that just sort of go, Elon for president, and they're just bloody like a revivalist meeting. It's just insane. It's a cult. That's it. It's a cult.
Definitely has the resemblance of that, for sure.
My final summation is it's a cult.
Well, thanks for joining, Keef. Glad you could make it from all the way down under.
Yeah,
and the internet.
Also, maybe you should read my book. It's quite interesting. So it's called The Great Sun Cube Swindle by Keef with an F, and it's different.
All right. And that's on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
That's the best place to find it?
Yeah, just look up Keef.
All right. Well, thanks for joining today.
Okay, thank you, TQ. Well, look forward to embarrassing myself in public. Be good. Okay, see ya. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.